All right, welcome back everybody. This time in this video, 2011 Ford Edge. This one we're gonna do full brakes. So her front and rear rotors, getting those swapped out, new brake pads, ceramic, be a little quieter and last a little longer. Got the brake slides on them. I'm gonna use a different lube than what they gave me. So stick around. We're gonna go ahead and do the fronts. I'll show you the full process of that. Then the rears as well. It's gonna be mirrored on the other side, but you know, as well as I do, when you go to do a different car, any other car, left, front, all that stuff, you can run into some possible problems. And if I do, you can go ahead and see how I work through it, you know. All right, we went with the TRQ brand. I'm pretty sure that that's just a default brand. I always shop for OEM replacement parts. I always shop on 1AAuto.com. Can't ever really beat the prices. I know Rock Auto, there's a lot of people that refer to Rock Auto, and they're all right. They're pretty fair price, but then they end up getting you with the shipping. These guys, it's usually free shipping, anything over, I believe, $50, maybe $100. I've ran these TRQ parts as OEM replacements on many vehicles. Almost any vehicle I've ever had or recommended and serviced myself. Just end up going on to 1AAuto.com and never had an issue with them since. Whether that's sensors, coil packs, brakes, anything. I think I got a door actuator before. Anything you can think of. So go ahead and check them out. Not sponsored, nothing, but I just stuck with them and they earned my respect and my trust. So these are what we went with. All right, once the vehicle is jacked up and in the air, you see I left the jack under there and I rested it on the jack stand. Go ahead and have double the support, doesn't hurt. Right here, you got a brake line, you got a bracket. This bolt right here, it's gonna be 10 millimeter. I like to take this off so that I'll have more room to move around the caliper when I need to. So go ahead and take that off. Again, 10 millimeter. All right, once you have it off, go ahead and put your bolt back just so you don't lose it. Know right where it's at. Next, you're gonna go ahead and loosen up this bolt and this bolt on your caliper. What those are guide pins. You can extract one out if you want, flip up the caliper and it'll slide out. If you want to do both, you can do both. Kind of unnecessary to do both. For the guide pin bolts, they are 17 millimeter. It's on there just fine. On there pretty tight, so you might want to use a breaker bar. Once you got them loose, you can do it by hand, ratchet, or if you got an impact, it'll be a little quicker. That's what it's going to look like right there. It's your guide pin. Put it on the ground out of the way, but put it up like this. I'll explain why later. Now you're able to take a screwdriver, little pry bar, any size pry bar if that's what you want. You're gonna want to peel back the calipers like so. and slide it right out with the guide like that. Okay. Try not to bind up the brake line, but have it rested up here and out of the way. Next, remove the brake pads. Okay, there's enough life left on these. We're gonna go ahead and save them for spares, I guess. They're getting new rotors, so at the same time they're gonna get new brake pads. So we're going with ceramic, a little quieter, less brake dust, lasts a little longer. Okay, right on here, on your bracket, you're gonna have these little clips. Okay, they pop right off. These are guide clips for your brake pads. I'll explain more about those, but go ahead and remove all the old ones. If you don't have new ones, you could take these and you could take a wire brush to them, clean them up, make them as nice as possible, and reuse them as well. This kit came with new ones, so that's what we're gonna do. You should have 4. Once those are off, your pistons, when you're putting on new brake pads, okay, they're going to be thicker. So your pistons right now, they're out more, accommodating for what pad you've used. We're going to push those pistons in. To do so, you can use an old brake pad. That's what I do. Put it right in there like that. Then you got a tool like this, okay? It threads, so this will be a backer, basically act as a brake pad. And then you'll take this and you'll screw it in or unscrew it. See, put it right up against there so it has nowhere to go. You go screw it in, pushing that brake pad and those pistons in. Okay? This isn't a process that you need to rush. Understand that when you're putting the brake pad or the brake piston back in, you're pushing all that brake fluid back up through your hoses and stuff where they came from into your reservoir. So going too fast, you don't need to. There's no need to do that. You cause more damage than good. Just turn it easy. As you can tell, they're gradually going in. Just take your time with it. No need to rush. You'll reach a point where you can't turn no more. The piston's all the way down, but you have 2 of them. As well as I would like for this to be pushing both of them at the same time, it is, but it's not even. So back this off a little bit, come over to the other side and just make sure that other one is pushed in as far as it can as well. Again, once it's tight, there's nowhere else to go. So they're in. Loosen that up, take your pad out. And then there you have it, your pistons are in, nice and flush. Next, go ahead and suspend your caliper. We're gonna be taking off the rotor, so the caliper is gonna be susceptible to hanging down. We don't want it to hang. So take anything you have. You can use a bungee cord, a clothes hanger, a metal one. You can twist up and make a hook. You can buy a hook specifically for this. I just use this reusable cable tie. Just kind of put it in wherever. I connect it to the coil spring. Just fine, it's not going nowhere. Your bracket right here. You got 2 bolts, one at top, one on the bottom. These 2 bolts, 19 millimeter, okay? Again, this is your brake assembly, so it's gonna be tight. It needs to be tight. You depend on your brakes. So use a breaker bar. If you have a breaker bar, use that. It's gonna take some muscle, but that's okay. Relatively easy. There you go, they're broke loose. Again, use an impact if you want to go a little quicker. It's just fine with a ratchet. Here's one. But there's two. Bracket comes off like that. Next is your rotor. Just remove it like so. All right, as far as the new rotor, when you take it out, odds are it's going to be in a bag like this, or similar. Okay. When they package these, they have a grease on them, okay? See on the tip of my fingers, it's got a grease. That's going to prevent surface rust and stuff like that, as it's got its shelf life. We don't want surface rust. So you can use brake cleaner, which I would recommend. I've always used brake cleaner. I don't have brake cleaner with me. So what you want to do is just basically take off that grease and stuff like that they have on there. I'm using 91% isopropyl alcohol, just as good. Some would argue that. I've used it, never had an issue with it. Just make sure you clean off the surface real well. Any grease on there, obviously you're not going to stop as well. You don't want that burning up and stuff like that. It's just better to go ahead and wipe it off. Okay. New side, more grease. Go ahead and add more isopropyl alcohol. You want it clean. Okay. Now we install it. Just avoid touching the surface of the rotor right here that the brake pad makes contact with. Avoid touching that with your hands. You can see my hands are dirty. You got natural oils and stuff like that. If we wanted to clean the surface, we don't want to add oil back on it. So just grab it from the sides, even the center hat. You can grab it like that. But go ahead and install the rotor. Just like that. It's going to free hang there a little bit. Now, once your rotor's on, you can go ahead and reinstall your bracket. Remember which way it came off. It's kind of only one way it can go on. You can't really put it on backwards because you don't have a way to screw it in. But put it on right there. Get your bolts started. If you want to use an impact, that's fine. Again, I understand it's faster. I'm going to use an impact, but make sure your threads are started. Last thing you want to do is cross thread them. That's going to, again, cause more damage than anything. Again, just like taking it off, how tight the bolts were, you're going to want to tighten them real good again. This is your brakes. You depend on these a lot more than what you realize. If you would like to Google and look up your torque specs, you can. I've never had an issue with it. Just make sure it's real tight. Okay. Once that's done, down here on your bracket, you're going to have in your brake kit, again, it's going to include these guides. What we removed earlier, the dirty ones, again, if you want to take a wire brush and clean them up, that's just as good. That's fine. I've done that before. It doesn't hurt to get new guides. Sometimes you got to buy them separate. Sometimes they come with the pads. In this case, they came with the pads. These are what your guides will look like. Just shiny compared to what you just took off. Okay. There's going to be a more flat side. See if I can hold it up just right. This side, everything's kind of flush and flat. On this side, you're going to have tabs and whatnot. Okay, from a different angle, you got this big tab. Keep this in mind and keep the flat side in mind. Okay, the flat side, it's always going to go towards the rotor. Wherever it's going to make sense, it goes towards the rotor. That way nothing scratches and makes contact. As far as this big tab, that's going to go on the inside, like that down here. Okay, once I install them, I'll take the camera and I'll show you the correct way. They got little pockets in them. Okay, they fit right down in the pocket. They have a clipping type of style to it, kind of where they lock in place. As small and intricate as these parts are, it does matter if it's locked into place. Again, they're your guides, so if they're not in place, when you go to install the brake pad, you'll know right away. The brake pad won't slide in there like it should. So you tell I did that one back. See, big tab goes on the inside. I messed that up. Flat side up against it. All right, they all clipped in just fine. As a reference point. See how the flat side is up against the rotor? Not able to make contact. It's mirrored on the other side as well. Don't know if you can see it. Get the best angle I can at it. Okay. All right, next, while it's up here, clean this guide pin. Sorry. Right here. You want to clean that guide pin off. Doesn't have to be perfect, but as clean as possible. So in reference to what I said when I put the bolt down over there, you don't want this smooth part touching the ground. The reason being, you don't want grit and gravel and stuff like that in there. Okay, I'll explain the purpose of that. With that, your brake kit, you can either buy it on the counter at an auto parts store. Your brake kit will come with lube, or you can get this. I stick with this stuff. It's handy to have around. It's called Sil Glide. You can get it at an auto parts store, Walmart. Okay, it's for your caliper slides, what we just installed. Now, and I'll explain how to use this. I do want to note, on the front, it says right here on the bottom line, all contact points, stating that you can use this on all contact points. Okay, I'd like to elaborate on that a little bit more. For these slides, yes, because your brake pads are going to make contact with that. It wants to slide. For these guide pins, yeah, you want to use it on that because make contact with it and stuff. I want to note, I shouldn't have to, but I think it's important to note that just because your brake pads make contact with the rotor, we don't put that on the surface. Again, we cleaned it off because we don't want anything slick on it. You want the brake pad, a dry brake pad gripping onto a dry, clean rotor, or else you won't stop. If you put slick glide on it, some lubricant, you're not going to stop. It just won't work right. I shouldn't have to explain it, but I feel like it is important to explain it. You never know. I'd like to make sure people don't do that and then possibly hurt themselves or cause an accident. All right, and as far as your brake pads, okay, your new brake pads, and you're going to take some of this, you're going to squirt a little bit right here on these tabs. All your brake pads will have little tabs right here. Okay, I don't put a lot. Just going to put some on both tabs, kind of move it around. Again, avoid getting it on the surface of the brake pad. That's not what it's for. It's for these. This way, when the brake pad does its job, moving back and forth, applying pressure, it can move freely. Okay. Now we put it in these guides. I like to start. Also note, I guess, so there's a little curved part right here. The brake pad is slightly curves. That's to match the face of the rotor. Okay. So it helps you understand which way the brake pad goes in. Put it in like this. Goes right in onto the slide. Okay. Now we do the same for the back. Get your pad. Apply a little bit on the tab, a little bit on the tab there. Move it all around. You want to make sure that that lube is on all the sides. A little bit on the front is fine. That, no need for the back, but I guess you can. Okay. Again, avoid hitting the face of the brake pad. We don't want any lube on the face of that brake pad, what makes contact with the rotor. Okay. Again, recognize the shape of the brake pad. Put it in your back slides, like so. That way you can see as a reference point. Okay. Same with the other side. If you can't see it, I'm casting a shadow. Trust me, it's in there, right? All right. As far as these guide pins go, you're going to want to apply a little bit on that guide pin. Okay, make sure you can see it best I can. You don't need a whole lot. Just put a little bit on there. Put it all on the guide pin. Okay. I'll remove the hanger. Okay. Slide it back in here. And if you notice by the nature of this guide pin, okay, let me get this other one, I'll clean it. Take off all that old gunk. At the same time, we're making sure that there's no little dust, gravel, debris, anything like that. Okay, so the purpose of these guide pins, okay, it's got a threaded part. The threaded part is to make sure that it's intact onto the caliper. Okay, this very smooth part goes inside of this, basically this cast sleeve. When you don't have pistons on this side, so the pistons on the back, when you push on the brakes, it pushes the fluid through, applies pressure onto that brake pad through the piston. Okay, now once it does that, naturally it's going to want to pull this caliper. So when it pulls it over, it's going to also shove this brake pad over on this side using the force of this piston. So that way they work together. If these aren't greased right, or if they're got friction and you got stuff in them, or like I mentioned earlier, cross threading. I've done it before in the past. This is how I learned on it. I was a kid, and it's the best way to learn is by making the mistake. But cross thread it, it's going to end up going cockeyed. Okay, so that way it's not able to move freely. If you ever have an issue where your brake caliper is wearing down one brake pad, or it's wearing unevenly, or when you're done driving you really smell it like it's hot, your rotor's hot, probably this is bent or cockeyed. I've had that same issue. Very important that again, if you want to use an impact, no matter what, you want to make sure that these are clean. Okay, again, a little lube so that it can slide and do its job well. Okay, you don't have to go crazy with it, because you're still going into that little cast sleeve, so you don't want to compress nothing. All right, and then you want to move. You want to make sure you screw it in by hand and make sure it's going in good. If it's not, if it's hard to go in and you got to keep applying a lot of force, then that's how you know that it's cross-threaded or something's wrong, okay? Both of these are moving just fine. Tighten them up again. Brake components, you want to make sure that they're tight. You don't have to overkill on these ones, but definitely make sure that they're tight. Okay? Once that's done, you're basically done. Remember, we loosened up this bracket and took it off so that we can have more mobility. Go ahead and put it back on there. There you go, front brakes. It's important to note that the piston style, your basic, you got some that have pistons on both sides, you got some that has piston on one side, 2 pistons. It's all relatively the same rule of thumb. You're going to want to compress the pistons in slowly because you're feeding that fluid back up into the reservoir. Push them in slowly. Put the brake pads in, make sure everything lines up, lube what needs to be lubed because it moves and moves freely, okay? And that's really all there is to it. The rear has a different style brake caliper, and I'll explain that. All right, here we are at the rear brake. I've already replaced these. So this is what this looks like. A little bit different setup. I'll explain everything to you. This cable is just like this on the other side. This is your emergency brake. So when you pull the cable, it brings this up, which pushes the piston in, locks the back wheels. Your emergency brake. So the first thing that we're gonna need to do is take this spring out, okay? It's not that difficult. There's little windows in here. It'll make sense when I pull it out. Pull that spring out. That'll alleviate some room. We're gonna pull this up. All right, well, I'll just show you, okay? So the first thing we're gonna do, we're gonna get that spring out. And then after that, we're gonna come over here, another bracket. We're gonna take that bolt out. That way it relieves this cable a little bit more, just so we have more mobility with it. Like that. Then this one comes right out with it. So basically it sits in there just like this. Okay. So put that off to the side. Next, that bracket bolt. All right, for this bracket bolt, it's also a 10 millimeter. Again, just kind of move it out of the way. Put the bolt back where it was just so you don't lose it. One less thing to worry about. All right, now I'm going to try and do my best to make it to where you guys can still see everything that I'm doing, but basically there's little clips right here around this neck. You're going to push those down and it'll pull the cable out of this. But in order to do that, we got to get this off of this little hook. So I'll show you the methods I do. You can get some pretty thick screwdrivers, or you can get some of these pry bars. I got a couple pry bars. Again, all different makes and models would be different. Just for this 2011 Ford Edge, for the rear brakes, this is what we got to work with. Okay. Just like that. It's kind of tough. If you have, honestly, if you got a better way, you've done these before, please chime in on the comments. I've done this a few times, but this is the only way that I've been able to get it. If you know a little tip and trick, I'd love to know, and I'm sure anybody else in the comments would love to know. Okay, now let me see if I can zoom in or get a better light. All right, now you can see these tabs right here. They're kind of springed up. That's preventing this from sliding out. Just kind of push those little tabs in, and then you'll be able to pull this out and the cable up through that little crack. Just like that. See? Boom. To do that, just kind of put the, again, we took off the bracket, just kind of get that out of the way, okay? That was honestly, that was the hard part, okay? There's a little tricky part to these calipers. All right, next step, you're gonna wanna loosen this just like the other one. This style right here, it's not like the fronts. It's not the whole guide pin. This bolt actually screws into this right here. This will spin with it. So this size right here, what you're gonna want, 13 millimeter, okay? Now, as you can tell, when I go to loosen it, okay, this one's gonna make a liar out of me. Usually this will spin with it, okay? See how they're spinning together as a pair? Usually it spins with it. This one seems to be freed up enough where it won't, okay? If it does, getting a regular wrench in there is pretty difficult. It's a tight fit. It's kind of narrow. What I found that helped me are a pair of these. They're like almost like a needle nose vice grip. I'm able to get in there and hold that while I extract that screw out right there, or bolt. But as you can tell, it came out pretty easy. All right, so that's the only one I take out. Once you take that one out, you'll be able to use it kind of hinge style. It's kind of like this, okay? There you go. It's got a little tension on this, sure, but it's nothing like hanging. You're plenty fine. It's got plenty of give to it. Okay, once you spring that open, go ahead and pop out your brake pads. Again, these brake pads, they got plenty of life, but we're changing the rotors, so new brake pads. Also, the same as the front, you're gonna have these little clips, okay? Again, these ones are dirty, just fine. If you need to reuse them, that's okay. Do the best you can, little sandpaper, Scotch-Brite pad, wire brush, anything, an old toothbrush even, just some degreaser, just kind of clean them up, okay? Because if you're gonna reuse them and you watch the beginning of the video, you'll know kind of the purpose that they serve and what you need to do to them anyway. Again, make sure you got 4. I do. Some fell out, so I got all 4. Okay. Again, with your brake kit, either it supplied you with new guides or you bought new guides, or again, you reuse them. So if you clean them, go ahead and reinstall them. If not, go ahead and use your new guides. These ones are a little bit different, okay? Same rule of thumb applies. The flattest side is going to go towards the rotor, okay? First we need to take off this bracket. The back bolts, 15 millimeter. One here, one here. I probably should have had a better angle on the last one. But you'll know, as long as you go by the size that I mentioned in the video, then there's only one bolt back there that fits that. Okay, again, breaker bar if you got it. These are brakes, they're on there tight. Break them loose, use an impact if you want. When they're broke loose, use a wrench, ratchet. Just gotta get those bolts out. I will be using an impact. I do have to get some funny angles to get it though. Okay, notice I'm holding on this bracket because we don't want this caliper to fall, okay? When I extract this screw, or bolt, it's going to want to hang. Support it. Okay. Once it's out, rest this. Wish there was a better spot to put this flashlight. Okay. Rest the caliper up back here, on top of the little support arm. Same thing as earlier. Your new rotor. Okay, it's going to have that grease on it again. So use your brake cleaner. Again, I prefer brake cleaner. I don't have any isopropyl alcohol, that's fine. I kind of wouldn't go out of those two. If you have a better suggestion, again, in the comments, please leave it down below what you might use. I know brake cleaner is basically the number one thing to do. Isopropyl alcohol is just fine. Okay, avoid touching the rotor part itself, the surface. Just support it by the hat, then go ahead and install it. All right, so when it comes to these brake pistons, this style, if you notice, it looks a lot different. It doesn't have the bucket. It's not necessarily the typical piston that you would look at, okay? It's got these little V shapes in it. There is a tool for this. I'm aware of that. I've never got the tool. I rarely run across these brake calipers. If I do more brake jobs in the future, then it's definitely worth investing, okay? No argument about that. But how I get past it, again, with these vice grips, I'll open up the jaws enough. You're not clamping down on nothing, okay? But you're wanting to basically kind of match the size of that, okay? About like that. And then these, you're basically gonna like you're screwing it in, lefty loosey, righty tighty. So you're gonna righty tighty. You're gonna screw it into the brake. I believe this is like a kind of like a ratcheting system almost. You're putting it back in by screwing it in, but with your piston acting the way it does, it more or less clicks as you push pressure on it, it's going to kind of spiral out, almost unscrew itself and apply pressure. So right now, in order to collapse this, we got to screw it in. I know it screws in because I've actually had to take one all the way apart and resurface the piston part itself. It might be difficult at first. You got to get your right angle and so on and so forth. Let me put you at a better angle. There, see how it's turning in? Again, you don't have to go crazy fast. Same rule applies. You're putting that brake fluid back in there. I have to maneuver around a little bit just by the shape and how it's hitting the side of this and stuff. So bear with me on that. The only thing I'm doing is screwing it in one way or another. Also, nothing necessarily different as the fronts or your typical brake caliper. Once it stops, it stops. You're bottomed out. No need to force it. One, it's not going nowhere, and two, you don't want to cause more damage. The first car that had one of these, it was a Mazda 6. Whether you know somebody or have one yourself, the brakes are just like this. Okay, so I can probably tighten it another eighth of an inch or so, but I'm not going to. It's pretty tight and it's down there. Once that's flush, reinstall the whole unit, reinstall the bracket first. Okay, again, you're gonna wanna support all this, okay? Don't let it free hang and don't let it drop. Try not to. I understand things happen. Try not to let it drop. Same rule applies. Make sure that you can thread it in by hand. Okay, you don't have to go all the way. It's gonna be tough as you go in deeper and deeper, but just thread it in. Make sure you line everything up. If it doesn't thread in right, it can be cockeyed, you know. And again, you don't want that. You'll have uneven wear. Your brake system will heat up for no reason. Well, for a reason, but for unnecessary reasons. Again, once you know that you have threaded in, you know you got to thread it in just fine. It's not going in at a weird angle. You're not cross threading it. You can use your impact and stuff. You don't want to force it in. I know it seemed like that top one was forcing in. It wasn't. Just trying to use this wobble. Sometimes if it's too much at an angle, it really binds up and doesn't want to spin. Again, brakes, can't stress it enough. Make sure it's tight. If you want to know the torque specs, go ahead and look it up, you know, and find out what that is and torque it down to spec if you're really anal about that. When I had to do motor block work, yeah, there's certain things that I definitely went torque specs. I got aluminum lug nuts for one of my other cars, one of my good builds. Those I use torque specs for, being aluminum lug nuts, 85 foot-pounds. I don't want to really exceed that, tear out the threads. All right, now we put on those guides. So same thing, you're gonna have a smooth side, okay? That's gonna go towards your rotor, and then the taller wall is gonna go towards the hat, towards your lugs. So kind of figure out what orientation they need to go. They'll fit in there real snug, nice. They'll kind of fit in there like they want to be there. Kind of like their home. Look at that, clips in just fine. Satisfying kind of clip too. Oh yeah. Next one. Last, I suppose. Yeah, there they are. Now for your new brake pads. Again, make sure you lube them. Put that, either you invest in some of this, or got some of your own, or use what they supplied you, or got it at the counter. But you wanna do these little contact points. Okay, nothing crazy. Coat around the whole tab. Those are the parts that's going to slide inside those little guides. Again, avoid hitting the surface of the brake pad. That's not what we're after here. Recognize the shape of it. Try and match it on the rotor. Second one. Yeah, these are a weird brake caliper. Again, I didn't notice or know they had such caliper until I ran into that Mazda. It's working on that. Took me a while to figure that one out, but I did. All right, there we are. Okay, they're in there. Go ahead and bring you down here for reference. Again, this might apply to other vehicles. It usually does. Almost, I'm sure, almost 100% of vehicles have the same, principles. But as far as this one, 2011 Ford Edge, this is what you're going to get. And that's how they're going to go on. All right, next, we already collapsed that piston by screwing it in. So it should go right over it just like that. Going right back to its home. That little screw or bolt, line it up. Again, 13 millimeter. Give it a couple pounds, nice and tight. All right, next is that cable. Honestly, reinstalling a whole lot easier. You're gonna grab it from where you had it, okay? Remember? Going to pull it up. Now you have room because you screwed in that piston. So now I don't have to use that pry bar. Okay, put it right on that. Put your cable down through that little hole, and then make sure it's all the way pushed and won't back out. See? And that spring, same ordeal. Okay. You got little ears on the spring. Okay. This one on the back, it goes through the back and curves in like that. This front one drops down into there. So I use, again, the little pry bar, screwdriver, pliers if you want. It's kind of tricky until you get used to it. Then I'll also bring the camera down there so you guys can see. There you go, that's installed. See part of that spring over there. Then that one goes right through that groove and out to the other side. Just like so. Cable installed, those little tabs. It's not backing out. Okay. The last thing, screw on that bracket again. Yeah, and make sure it's threading in just fine, no cross thread. Tighten it, done. All right, so that's the rear brakes. I'll be with you in a second. All right, guys, and there we have it. 2011 Ford Edge, brakes and rotors. Like I said, same rule applies with any vehicle. You know, and you might have different style calipers like we ran into with the back. Might be the same as the front. Single piston, double piston, maybe even pistons on the outside. Same stuff though. Relatively simple. You could come across problems. Just remember, take it easy when you're putting in the brake calipers. You don't want to shove all that fluid back in there. It's underneath it, or it's powered by a brake booster, you know, and certain pressure, ways that it does it, you're more or less forcing it back in. I would like to say too, when you do a brake job and you're pushing the pistons back in, understand that when you start the vehicle, before you put it in gear, please, before you put it in gear, remember, you have to pump the brakes until the pedal gets stiff again. You got to bring those pistons back out to where it's adding pressure on your rotors and stuff. You don't want to be just take off and start driving and then go to use your brakes when you need them and you panic. Start pumping them a few times and then all of a sudden they work. Last thing. So remember that after you do brake pads, always pump your brakes before you take off. Once they start getting stiff, you're good to go. Thank you very much for tuning in, watching my video. Thank you for the subscribers. That's awesome. I didn't think that this would probably work out the way that it is. The subscribers that I have, it's amazing. And all the views, I'm glad people's even interested in it. And I hope that I'm even helping people. It means a lot to me. And I got some other stuff coming up. I don't know if anybody's into car audio. I'm pretty big into it. I got a couple things here. I'm waiting on a few more. I'm going to do a full install for the doors for the Jeep. So if you're into that stuff or know somebody that is, maybe you want to send them the link. That video's coming up. I got to wait for the rest of the stuff to come, but be an amplifier and all door speakers, a full wire kit, Scar audio. So I'm excited for that. If there's any other things, any suggestions, please comment down below. I love the feedback. I've had quite a bit of feedback on the Harbor Freight tire changer and the Jeep light bar. Different suggestions. I love that. That not only helps me for the future, I learned something off it. The people, the viewers learning. If there's anything that you have to chime in, please do. As far as this video goes, it's going to basically come to an end. So thank you.